This is English Lang, Unit 2, Part 1. I don't think I actually have to do a Part 2 to this. I think I covered everything in Unit 2 that I needed to. But Unit 1 was divided into 2 parts. Like I said, I'm going to go down in a chronological order, so here we are. Today we're going to deal with reading and writing, informative text, sorry. I would have said, I think in the first part 1, we would have talked about the purpose and the audience when we are writing something or reading, to be able to identify not only the purpose but the audience. And today we're going to go into a further understanding of that. So, the things to make note of. Writing that seeks to pass on information is called expository writing. Expository texts start with what is known as a topic sentence. And anytime you're writing expository, well, exposition is the way I should say it, you need to start with a topic sentence. And what a topic sentence is the first sentence, and that first sentence gives a general idea of what is to come in the paragraph, and there should be one for each and every paragraph in your writing. I would have talked about what it was and stuff like that in the first unit. So the first sentence, hence after, follows a logical order in, this supposed to be coordinates, with the first sentence. So if your topic sentence is natural disasters, or the main natural disasters in the Caribbean are hurricanes, right? Then I expect the rest of your paragraph afterwards to follow a logical order. So I expect you to talk about what a hurricane is, how does it form, blah 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 blah, and go on down in an order that makes sense and flows. Different points and ideas are connecting using linking words, and I did talk about the linking words before, but I will go through them here again. So linking words like as well as, similarly, firstly, in contrast, however, consequently, furthermore, and therefore. I would have also talked about the correct way to use these words, especially when you're starting a new sentence in a paragraph, or even sometimes a new paragraph, and you're trying to get a word that would make the points flow into each other because they don't necessarily fit together. So you need a word to add in there, or a phrase that would link it and make the reading flow. Okay? So I said as well as, you usually use that when you're agreeing with your point before, as well as similarly. Firstly is how you would start a new set of points. Let's say, again, using the example of hurricanes in the Caribbean. Let's say your first Caribbean is what is a hurricane, and then your second Caribbean is what are the effects of a hurricane. You can start that one with firstly and talk about your first effect, and then go on to list the rest afterwards. And you would use as well as and similarly to connect those other points in that paragraph. So now we go on to the one that's different. So in contrast, this is when you're talking about a new point. So you can say, let's say you're talking about damage that a hurricane causes to infrastructure, and then you say in contrast, it also damages. There's also power outages and water outages. Then you said in contrast because you're talking about a new point there. However is also the same as in contrast, where you use it to talk about something new. Consequently, also talking about something that you were talking about before, or saying, again, consequently is using the cause and effect in the scheme. So if the cause is the hurricane, then we say consequently because of the hurricane, this and this happened, or consequently because of water outages, or the power shortage, communication between people is hard during a hurricane. So consequently using that manner. Furthermore and therefore, I'll just say etc. for now, because they're talking on and on. And I did cover this, I think, in the first unit. There are also a lot of other linking words, and you can always, sometimes what I tend to do is I would write and say what is a synonym of in contrast or therefore, and then I get some more linking words as well. Just be careful the way you use them and make sure you use them correctly, because I often see people use them incorrectly. So they would say in contrast when they're talking about the same point or making an addition to that point, and they'd say in contrast, which is incorrect, and would lead to a little like disparity, and when you're reading it, it doesn't make sense and it doesn't flow. Alright, so I'm still here with language and, well, still here with audience, but I want to connect your language to the audience now. So when last I would have talked about it, we would have said, okay, so this is how we identify our audience, and I would have given you, like, say, advertisement, and I would have said, who is the audience of this advertisement, and we would have done that last class. But in this case, I want to show how language now is linked with choosing the audience, or what language you would tend to use when you're catering towards a particular audience. I wanted to make an activity for this, but it proved to be a bit difficult and I was on the time constraint, so I'll just do as much explaining as I can. So when writing an expository piece, it is expected to be for an adult audience, because usually expository, again, remember, expository is when you're writing more informational facts and stuff like that. So it's expected to be for an adult audience, and the language used should reflect that audience. What does this mean? It means that you would use bigger words, and I had to put this in because not just to sound good, but make sure that you use the words well. If you know a word but you're not too sure how to use it, then I'd suggest not using it. Okay, use a simpler word. It's okay, but you know you would speak with bigger words to appeal to that adult audience instead of saying baby words, because that might bore an adult audience. So for expository pieces, you use bigger words. Again, I want we're not coming to me, the pronunciation. But again, I want to say that it's not just to sound good, but use them well. Alright? So the next thing I want to talk about is subject and verb agreement. When you're writing an expository piece, this is very, very important. This is so that, especially for adult audiences, so when we read it, it makes sense to us. Also, nouns and pronouns used in unison. And what this means is, I've seen it happen. It may seem simple or sound simple, but I've seen it happen. What this means is, when you're writing and your noun is, say, me and my friends, right? You have to use the correct pronoun, so the correct they, instead of their, or the correct th word, because you know there's their, their, there, they, those ones. People tend to use them incorrectly. So if you're talking about my friends and I, usually you say they did something, or we, even, because they say my friends and I added myself. But if it was just the friends, you would say they, or them. And there is when you're talking about you, the person. Sorry, not there. When you're talking about you, the person, or actually, let me make a more general example. If you said the boys, then the correct one is to use he. I'm trying to think of an example where you would use their, thear. That shows that shows ownership. That's a pronoun that shows ownership. So the correct use for there is when you're talking about something that belongs to others. So you would say, let's say, that lunchbox store is hers. I'm starting to say this wrong. But you understand what I mean when I say ownership, though. I just can't think of a good example right now. And that's why I wish I had done the activity, because then I'd have it there. Anyways, you also want to use the same tense throughout. When you're writing expository, it's best to speak in the present tense. But if you're writing, say, an expository piece on history, then you have no choice but to write in the past tense. But expository writing is best expressed in the present tense, and you should stay in the present tense the entire time. Do not change tenses throughout your work, because then you're giving it a very narrative feel and it's no longer an expository piece. Moving on though from the audience and language and stuff like that, we want to move on now to the sequencing of your sentence. So we already decided that, hey, we're writing an expository piece. Now, how do we sequence our sentence? So this is what not to do and what you should do. So, what not to do. I saw the Caribbean islands flying from the Americas to Mexico. Now, usually you would read that sentence and you'd find nothing wrong with it. However, if you look at what you should do, you should say, while I was flying from the Americas to Mexico, I saw the Caribbean islands. And the reason for this is because if I say I saw the Caribbean islands flying, it literally means that the Caribbean islands, the big landmass or whatever it is, was in the air and going through the air, flying with you on the plane or what have you. They were flying and you saw them. You could have been on the ground and look up and saw the Caribbean islands flying. That's what that sentence actually means. When we read it, we would infer, and the correct meaning, however, because we know islands can't fly. But let's say you wrote that same sentence about something that could fly, then it would be confusing to the reader. All right, I hope that everybody gets that. Anyways, for the second example I have here, I have all I saw at the bus stop was a man holding a child and an elderly lady. The way that it should be written is all I saw at the bus stop was an elderly lady and a man holding a child. Now you can see here very much how the sequencing of that sentence matters. If I write elderly lady last, it might sound as though the man is literally holding a child in his hand and the elderly lady as well. Like it's his child, like he has two children, an elderly lady and a young boy or girl. But when I write it the opposite way and put elderly lady first, then the meaning cannot be, will be inferred the correct way. You can't infer it the incorrect way to say that the man is holding an elderly lady in his hands. Because you say you saw the elderly lady, and then you saw the man holding a child. So just because the way I changed one phrase in the sentence to first instead of last, it makes a big difference in terms of the way that it can misconstrued it in the reader's eyes. Alright? So sequencing the sentence is very important, and you should look at these slight little things when writing as well. Because a lot of the times we do look at your word and we might infer the correct meaning, but sometimes we don't. And it would have just been fixed if you would put one phrase a different place in the sentence. So I thought I should add that in there. That's something to be very wary about. Next, we have facts and opinions. And this is important when you're talking about expository writing, because, and I know I've written everything so far that expository writing, but it does work. A lot of these tricks and tips do go into the other types of writing as well, but I'll cover in a later unit. Facts and opinions. A fact is something that can be proven to be true. An opinion can be proven to either be true or false. Very slight difference between the two. A fact will always be proven true, but an opinion can be either true or false. So, example, a fact. Humans need food and water to survive. We can prove that. We can give one human food and water and don't give the other. And if that human dies, then it's a fact. That's a terrible experiment or example, but there have you. Opinions. It is better to live in the country. That can either be proven to be false or true. We can do a survey and see what people prefer, and we could do it based on the opportunities in the country versus the opportunities in the town. We can do it on a whole different, a plethora of different criteria, and see if it's actually better, maybe more cost efficient if that is what we're looking to talk about, and we can see that if it's better or not. So it can be true or it can be false. So henceforth that would be an opinion. The reason I brought up facts and opinions here though is because when you're doing expository writing especially, it is best to put in facts rather than opinions. Alright? Narrative writing uses opinion and the way you feel about a certain thing. Expository, you just write true and true to what it is. And that will come up more, I think, in the next slide after this about language use. But anyways, language use. So our language can be used, as we saw before, to inform and to influence the way we think. And that was more in terms of the expository writing. We use it to inform and say things that are more factual, and obviously to give us a higher understanding and change the way that we think. So even though all these topics sound a bit, you know, like all over the place, it is really connected. So writing though, our language, can also be used to invoke emotion. I have an example. If I was talking about a natural disaster and I wanted to invoke fear from the reader, or a sense of fear into the reader, to fear this thing that I'm talking about, whether it be a hurricane, a tornado, a volcano, or earthquake, whatever the correct thing, I'd use words like terrorized, wreak havoc, threatening. You know, that language, the language that I use, I could have said that is dangerous. I mean, anything could be dangerous, really. Even sitting in your house could be dangerous. Something could, a tree could fall from outside on the house. Dangerous does not exactly, it describes a natural disaster, but using that word or that language will not invoke fear into a reader. Will not really like scare us. Dangerous doesn't scare us. but terrorized, wreak havoc, threatening. Those are words, and especially used in a sentence and added to other words, can really invoke fear in a reader, especially if it's like a young child, alright, which is more impressionable mind and actually doesn't know what we know about a natural disaster. Then they might even invoke more fear in a reader that's unaware. Alright, so using your language, the words that you use, and the way that you sentence your structure, again looking back at the sequences of the sentence and words and stuff like that, you can also invoke emotion. It can also be other emotions like happy, or even, boy, words is just not coming to me today, but the other emotions. It could even invoke sadness. You can say that someone died when you're writing, and it not be as sad, but you can word it in a different way, or paint a scene in a picture of the family mourning and crying, and make it a lot more tragic. So your language, the way you use your language and the words you use, have a very big impact on your writing. Alright, very, very big. So always be careful and wary of that. Next, I have objective and subjective. So I've talked about the way that they can be used to influence the reader. Now I want to talk about the different, what you would refer to it as, because the first one is actually objective and the other one would be more subjective. So objective, two forms of writing. Objective, it focuses on what is being described and gives details like color, shape, and size. So when I'm writing in this way, in this manner, and this is very expository writing, a very, very expository writing style or form, I would just say things as they are, right? And my example here is the description of a wanted suspect or missing person. I don't, for example, if I'm describing a missing, well, a suspect, a wanted suspect, I'm describing his face. I would say he has a broad face with a broad nose and beady eyes and big ears. And from that explanation, you might think, whoa, that's a really scary face. But I did not say that. If I was using subjective writing, I might say he has a really scary face, right? But objective just talks about, it just gives an accurate, clear, and concise about the information. So shape, color, size, and it stays that way. Nothing extra, right? Subjective, written on the other hand, will use emotion as well. Will use emotion, and it won't only say what something is, but also your response to it. So I won't just describe his face. I would say how it makes me feel, or I would say that is a scary face. I describe my response to it as well. So example is very expressive writing. I wanted to write a long example, but I decided that I would say instead. So example is the beach. Let's say I'm talking about the beach. If I was doing objective writing, right, I would say, I would talk about the way the golden sand, I would be like, it has golden sand, the sea is so clear I could see the bottom, the breeze is really nice, whatever. And I would stick to just those visual and textile words. But if I was using subjective, I would say I love the grainy feel between my toes, and I love the crashing of the waves is make me feel calm, and then the breeze is, I love the way the breeze blows through my hair, whatever the case is, right? I talk more, way more expressive, and that's the difference between objective and subjective. I think I explained that pretty well. So moving on, and this is the last thing we're going to cover in this unit, because I didn't want, this unit was actually not long, and I didn't want to go into a new unit and cut it halfway in the case that I could put it all into one, because the way that the units works is that they're very different, and I don't want to confuse anyone. So this is the last thing I'm going to do today, which is summary writing, and this is actually really important. So what is a summary? A summary is a brief statement or account of the main points, not including needless details. Very important. So we use summaries in our daily lives way more than we notice, right? Even when I was doing this slide, I realized how much I really do summarize things. So, what did you do for your vacation? We just had, well, summer was a long time ago, but imagine we just had summer vacation, even a short vacation, Easter, and you ask your friend, what do you do for your vacation? Now, your friend is not going to sit there and tell you, well, the first day of vacation, I just sleep because I was tired of school. The second day, I woke up, eat breakfast, do this. You're going to summarize it. Even that's a longer period, of course, but even something as simple as, how was school today? When you come home and your mother asks you that question, you're not going to say, yeah, so when I get to school, I see my friends, we talked before the first class was boring, then I went into the second class and I learned a lot. You're not going to say all of that, right? You're just going to say, yeah, it was good. That could literally be your summary of the entire day. It was a good day at school. There might have been ups and downs along the way, but the general consensus or general view of the day was that it was a good day. You didn't fall down, dirty your clothes, nobody didn't bully you, so it was a good day, right? So we do summarize almost everything that we do in our daily lives. We just don't notice. And then when it comes to summary writing now, people do struggle. And I'm like, you do this all the time, okay? But we're going to go into some ways and tips and tricks and stuff to help us with our summary writing here. So, when you are reading a passage to summarize it, right, here are some steps that you should take or could take. So after completely reading it, I find some children like to summarize part by part as they're reading. That's not the way. After you've completely read the entire passage or whatever it is you're summarizing, read everything first. Read it all the way through. Second thing you should do is identify what is the overall view, what's the overall point or purpose of this passage. Okay? So if it's talking about, I think the example I have later is climate change, I think, or something like that. If it's talking about climate change, that is the main thing. Climate change. That's what you got from it. It's talking about climate change. Alright? So identify what is the overall view. And then now what you do is identify how the different parts correlate. Now, you know that when you go to write an essay or anything like that, well, some people do this, some don't. But you should though. You should write points on what you're going to write. Points for like each paragraph, and then you've got little sub points of what you're going to write in that paragraph, and that has nothing to do with what the main topic is that you're writing on, right? So what you do is you reverse this operation, because the passage that you're writing, the person who wrote it did those steps, right? So you reverse the operation. You look to see what is the main thing, and then you look to see what would those points that the person would have identified and write each paragraph on, and then also you check into the sub points if you're that good. However, you might not need those sub points, especially depending on the length of the summary. Alright? So you identify how the points correlate, which is those sub points and stuff like that. And especially when you're summarizing an expository piece, remember I said expository pieces have topic sentences, which is the first sentence in each paragraph. Just read that sentence. That's going to tell you everything that's going to happen in the following one, and you can literally write in your own words about that topic sentence, and it will cover what has come after. It's really not difficult. You just have to really break it down and think. Last point, after that, you should be able to make a good summary. Yes, you should. I'm still going to go into some more tips and tricks again. So, important things to know. The word limit on a summary is far more important than an essay. If you write a little bit over your essay, say you have to write 300 to 400 words, and you write 450 words, it's not going to penalize as great as if I said write 120 words as your summary and you write 140. Usually, teachers will just read 120, and when they get 120, stop. And everything you wrote after that will not be marked. Alright? Sometimes if you have to write 300 to 400 words, they would read that extra 50, especially if you wrote a good piece and it's not wordy or boring, right? So it's way more important. So really pay attention to that word limit. Do everything you can to stay under it. The next thing you can do is look for repetition of phrases and words. A lot of the time, a lot of phrases are repeated. Just cut them out. Any sentences as well too, or words that you see over and over again, cut them out. Alright? And this is really important. This is where a lot of children fall down. Use your own words as much as possible. Remember I said earlier, pick up what is the topic sentence and then write on that in your own words, not really looking at what is there. A lot of times what they would do would pick up sentences that they think important and write those and try to add them together with some linking words. That doesn't really work. Write it in your own words. A summary is really what you understand about something, right? Even when you summarize in your daily life, let's go back to the example of how was your day at school. You don't think back into your day and think of the main points and say them. You summarize the entire day and said, if I outweigh the bad and the good, it was a good day. And you say good day. As simple and condensed as that sounds, it is the same thing for summary writing. You find out what the main point is in whatever case, and you write your own words on it. You don't have to just pick up sentences here and there and try to add them together. Alright? And the last one is to write in continuous prose. What this basically means is that, again, when you fall victim to that picking out certain words thing, and you try to just select this sentence, oh, this sentence important, so let me write this sentence, and then you see another one sentence, and then try to pick them out and just add some linking words and think that it's going to be okay. That does not work. So that is where writing in continuous prose come in. And what this means is, one second, because I had the note written for what a continuous prose was. But it basically means to make sure that everything follows in that order and is not from point to point. So a lot of times when you fall victim to that, just picking out this part and then this part, what happens is that it ends up being choppy and it doesn't sound like something to read. It sounds like you just literally made points to write whatever it is that you're writing. So writing in continuous prose means that it still sounds as though it was what was basically originally written. Alright? So writing in continuous prose means that you organize your writings into fluently connected words, sentences, and paragraphs. So it's just not point by point. Usually 2 paragraphs is enough when you're doing like 120 words, and 120 words is the usual amount to summarize to. So the last thing that we're going to do today is this activity. So I typed this out, and this is I didn't give it a heading or anything either. Just type it out. So what I want you to do is just read this this passage here, and to summarize it into as little words as you possibly can. And I'll give you about, what time is it? Yeah, I'll give you about 10 minutes to do so. Alright, so I'm going to just quickly read through it. So as pollution affects the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the results are likely to be serious. Carbon dioxide constitutes only a small part of the atmosphere, but it has an important function in maintaining the balance between radiation from the sun entering the atmosphere and radiation leaving the earth. Some of the radiation is absorbed by the earth, and some is radiated back into the atmosphere. The carbon dioxide in the atmosphere prevents some of the radiation from leaving the atmosphere. Thus, the heat remains in the atmosphere, and carbon dioxide helps to prevent the temperature of the earth from falling. So this was poorly written. Usually, summaries are poorly written. And as you can see, carbon dioxide is said over and over and over again. So that is cut out. You say it once, and then after that, you can say it, referring to carbon dioxide. And there you've lessened your words almost immediately. There's a sentence in the middle here that is very, very repetitive. It says, I think it's from about here, but it has an important function. I think it's here. Some of the radiation is absorbed back by the earth, and some is radiated back by the atmosphere. The carbon dioxide in the atmosphere prevents some of the radiation from leaving the atmosphere. All this was very repetitive. From some to atmosphere, that's 2 sentences, super repetitive. You can cut out most of that. But if you notice, right, when you were reading this, it started off telling you, yeah, we're going to talk about carbon dioxide and the atmosphere, right? Because that's the topic sentence. If pollution affects the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So the 3 main things there is pollution, carbon dioxide, atmosphere. That's what this is going to talk about, right? And by pollution, it actually meant the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So you can also cancel pollution. It's just carbon dioxide and atmosphere. That's what it's talking about. And if you notice, there was a steady progression right the way through in this passage down to the end, where it kind of gave almost a summary of the paragraph, if you really think about it. Because it was talking about all of this jabba 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 jabba, and then it got to the bottom and it said what it really needed to say. So when I was doing this, I just selected these two sentences and I thought that was it. Of course, I put them in my own words and maybe add a little bit from above, but these two sentences is ideally the summary of this passage. The carbon dioxide in the atmosphere prevents some of the radiation from leaving the atmosphere, and carbon dioxide helps to prevent the temperature of the earth from falling. That's what this passage led to talking about how the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere prevents the temperature from falling. It led to that, so I'm going to close with that part. I can say it in my own words if I wanted to cut down how long it is, but it can end with that part, and I'm just going to talk about the fact that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, I don't even have to say all of this, but just talk about carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and how it's pollution and it prevents the radiation from leaving the atmosphere. And that's it. That's all it really needs to say. And that's a really good summary right there. So if you had anything remotely similar to that, or you even got this down to into 2 sentences, I would say pushing 3, but 2 sentences maybe. Get it down to 2 sentences, and that was really good. So here ends this unit actually for today.